I wanted to offer some quick thoughts on this Riq Woolen situation. Obviously, last Sunday, Ian Rappaport put out a tweet suggesting that the Seahawks would be willing to listen to offers for Riq Woolen. That only happens for one of two reasons. Either the Seahawks want teams to know if they pick up the phone, there's a chance they'll get a positive response if they want to trade for Woolen, or it's Woolen's camp who fear that perhaps he's going to see a much reduced role in the coming weeks and they want him to go somewhere where he can start and play every week to max out his potential earnings in the off season. I'm hearing a lot of people saying a lot of different things about what the Seahawks should or shouldn't accept, what they could or could not do with Woolen, and I just want to give you my opinion on where I think we are with this, and I think we have to be realistic. I do not think there is a massive trade market out there for Riq Woolen. I think it's unrealistic that they're going to get a mid-round pick for him. I think it's unrealistic to think they're going to get a really good player in a trade. They might be able to do a player for a player swap, but I don't think it's going to be somebody that has Seahawks fans, really excited when a potential deal is announced. I think it's probably going to be a lot more modest than people think. Now, why do I think that? First and foremost, he just isn't playing that well. He's not a total disaster. I think he played reasonably against the Steelers and the Saints, which was a blowout. Obviously, didn't end the game well against the Niners and didn't end the game well against the Cardinals. It seems the Seahawks are quite prepared to move on. This is not exactly screaming, come and get me for a lot of other teams. I just think that this is a player who fell to the fifth round when many people, including Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, who I interviewed and talked about Riq Woolen and said he was going to go in the second round. I gave him a second round grade on my draft board. That was not a unique thing. A lot of consensus view was that Riq Woolen was going to go into the second round, and the league let him fall to the fifth round for a reason, and maybe multiple reasons. And then he has a good rookie season. Yeah, great. And, perhaps the league overthought it, and they made a mistake and the Seahawks are going to capitalize on. But since then, in 2023 and 2024, he hasn't played that well. And he started the season now not playing well again. And the Seahawks are seemingly willing to move on. This is not the characteristic of a player that the leagues can go, get me Riq Woolen into my team. I just don't think it's very, very likely, let alone we're going to give away a big asset like another good young player or a player who could develop into something, a former first-round pick or a mid-round draft pick. I just don't think you're going to get that. I think the absolute max that you can expect is a low-level player swap, with somebody else on a team that that particular team perhaps has a sense about their player that you have about Riq Woolen. You quite like to move him on for whatever reason, and you're just going to do it, and it's kind of shuffling the deck chairs a little bit, and you bring in Riq Woolen if you're the other team to have a look at him, and you bring in a player to Seattle to have a look at them. I don't think you're going to get a major contributor in a trade for Riq Woolen. I just do not think that trade value is there. And I also have to say, people are now going, well, just keep him then. You know what? You might as well just have him for depth, and then he'll get paid in the off season, and you may well get a decent compensatory pick. I just don't think that's very likely. I don't think this is a player at all that's trajectory is to go and get a significant payday. I think what's much more likely, I mean, if the season ended today, obviously it's not, there's still a lot of football to come. But if the season ended today, I think Riq Woolen would probably be looking at a prove-it deal next year. For a low-level, modest, 1-year prove-it deal, maybe 2, to go somewhere and see if, someone else can deliver on that potential. But I suspect that that's probably going to be it. I do not think there's going to be a lot of interest in this player. And I think maybe as Seahawks fans, we just need to wrap our heads around that and come to terms with it. Now, if I'm wrong and they get a really good draft pick in exchange for him, or they can get a good player in exchange for him, and there is another team out there that thinks, yes, we can make this guy really good, then I will do another video and I'll say I got that completely wrong. I completely underestimated Riq Woolen's standing in the league. I just don't. I just don't think that's going to happen. The NFL looked at Riq Woolen before the draft and said, you are amazingly talented, but you're not for us. And when a player who's like touted by many who know what they're talking about, like Jim Nagy, say potential second round, and a player lasts to round 5, that typically means a lot of teams didn't have him on their board for whatever reason. And I don't think teams are going to be sat here in 2025 going, hey, that guy had a really good 2022 season, so now I want to make a big splash to go and get him. They're much more likely to go, this guy hasn't played well for 3 years, really, not consistently well. And therefore, why would we want him? Like, if we're going to have him, let's just a total non-gamble. We'll give you a 6th. We'll give you a 7th. We'll swap a player we don't want. Whatever, go on, we'll bring him in, let's have a look. And I just don't think there's going to be a huge trade market for him. Again, I think we just have to sort of maybe wrap our heads around that, because I keep seeing suggestions about what the Seahawks can get, and I don't think it's very realistic. And then the other sort of a point of view on this is people going, well, if you can't get a great deal, why not just keep him? Like, have him for the depth, because it's better to have him than not have him. I think Mike McDonald's had enough. I just genuinely think that, you know, this is a coach who wants everybody on that defense to do their job so that the whole group can function. And if one player is not doing his job, everything kind of falls apart. And that nearly happened at the end of the Arizona game. It's why they kind of moved off the linebackers very quickly last season when it obviously wasn't working, and they changed things around. I almost think this, to a slightly lesser extent, is the same situation as what happened with the linebackers last year, that they are basically saying, we need to move you on, and we need to put other people in those positions who are more reliable, because otherwise this isn't going to work. I think they've had enough. I think Mike McDonald had enough of Riq Woolen a year ago, and I think he's been given a little bit of extra time to work this through, because clearly the physical talent is there and he was very cheap. But we're not at that position anymore. It's just he isn't improving. He hasn't taken, you know, the opportunity to go into a contract year and really elevate his play. He still seems like the same player that we've watched for the last 2 seasons. And I think Mike McDonald has basically just gone, he's not for me. And rather than have him sort of sat on the bench and maybe sort of feeling sorry for himself, and maybe, you know, not reacting very well that he's not playing when he will have come into this season expecting that this is my year to go and get an amazing contract in the off season. None of that's happening. I don't think it not be the best thing to have him on the bench feeling that way. And here's the other thing I'm going to point out here is that I went back and, for whatever reason, last week was reading the articles that I wrote when Pete Carroll left about the coaches that could come in. And the one thing I wrote about Mike McDonald when I was talking about the defense in Baltimore was what an amazing job Baltimore had done just plugging in random guys at cornerback across from Marlon Humphrey, to the extent they were like using converted safeties to play across from Marlon Humphrey, and it was working. You know, they were using players who've since left Baltimore and have played really badly outside of this system. So Mike McDonald seems to have this ability to sort of get the best out of defensive backs and incorporate them with the system. And we're seeing that a bit with obviously with Josh Jobe, who has come in and has kind of taken away Riq Woolen's job, that they can plug these guys in. So whether it is Woolen or Kendrick, or whether it's Nehemiah Pritchett, whether it's going to be Nick Manwari doing sort of a varied role, whether it's somebody else who comes in who they've got their eye on, maybe on the practice squad, whatever it is, I just think that they will feel like it's addition by subtraction, that you can move this guy and we back ourselves, especially because you've got a very good defensive back coach in Carl Scott, to cope and move on and not feel like losing Riq Woolen is going to absolutely hammer the depth. And I think it's a fair position for these coaches to have, because they have now got a track record of developing players. And the fact that they haven't done it with Riq Woolen so far is perhaps indicative again of why they want to move on. Perhaps think it's a bit of a lost cause, that there's not going to be any sort of future for him in Seattle. And they're certainly not going to pay him. And I have to say, I don't think anybody else is going to pay him either. So I just think it's a sad squandering of massive potential on his behalf. And it's a shame. I wish he'd kind of really sort of taken some of that. It felt like it was getting a bit of a kick up the arse last year. And it doesn't really feel like he's taken that on board and sort of come back this year in a contract year and gone for it and thrown himself headfirst into it, because we're not seeing those results on the field. So to sort of wrap up, I just wouldn't get your hopes up that the Seahawks are going to get a massive offer. Again, if I'm wrong and they make a great trade, an inspired trade, I will come back and admit how wrong I was on that. I think what is going to happen is he's going to move on for peanuts, effectively. And The Seahawks are going to have to look in other places for sort of, if they're going to make a big move, they're going to have to probably use some draft picks. They're probably going to have to be quite creative. They've been aggressive the last 2 years to get Ernest Jones on a rental, to get Leonard Williams on a rental. I would not be surprised at all if they go big to get somebody else, whether that's another defensive player or a weapon or whatever it is, before the deadline, because they will sense there's an opportunity here. It's not a good 2026 draft. Go on SeahawksDraftBlog.com today. You will find a big article again where I'm talking about the draft class and how it's just not impressing, and there's not a whole bunch of great options. There's not a lot of first round prospects. So I think they will be more inclined to go, we can afford to be a little bit aggressive here, to go and get a player that could make us the NFC West champions, that could make us a contender in the NFC. I think that is plausible. I just think you are going to have to be the aggressor with that. You are going to have to make that trade happen. I do not think you are going to get that player because someone is going to really value Riq Woolen and they're going to make a swap deal for you. I just do not think that is realistic at all.